Welcome back everybody to another MOTOBOB video, and today in the studio we've got the Triumph Scrambler 400X. And I think it's fair to say that this is one of the most hotly anticipated bikes of the year, and I've been desperately trying to get my hands on one for review. You see, they actually announced it in June last year, so that's pretty much 8 months now. And while I did get to see one outside the factory and sit on it and push the buttons and, you know, get a good feel for it, really, it just comes down to the riding. Could it be the perfect beginner bike or the ideal baby scrambler or even a super cool looking second bike? Well, I think it's time to take it for a spin to find out.
Now let's start with the stuff that I like about it, and I think, you know, the big one has to be the price and any concerns you might have had about it being built on Triumph's behalf out in India by Bajaj, who, let's face it, are more used to making affordable bikes than the, let's say, more premium bikes that Triumph are normally building. You know, those worries will probably evaporate as soon as you see one in the flesh and swing a leg over one and have a play with the controls and all that sort of good stuff. It really does feel like a lot of bike for the money, a really nicely finished bike, and also, just looking at the price versus the competition at £5,595, you know, that's only a few £100 more than the Royal Enfield Scram 411, which is much slower, way down on power and a little bit up on weight. It's pretty much on the nose as well with the new Svartpilen 401 from Husqvarna, and it's even a few £100 less than the Honda CL500 Scrambler, which you could say in many ways is a pretty similar bike.
Now, I've got to say as well, with this bike being a little bit smaller in capacity, I was expecting it to perhaps be a bit small in stature as well, but that's absolutely not the case. You've got that scramblery stance with a fairly tall seat height at 835mm, the big wide handlebars that are risen up a bit, and also some chunky foot pegs with the removable rubber inserts, so it all adds up for something that actually feels quite substantial. Now, I wouldn't necessarily say that this bike would be my first choice for off-roading. It's okay standing up, but it doesn't really feel quite as natural as something like a Scrambler 1200 that's a bit more designed for it. But what all those scramblery features do mean is that there's absolutely loads of space, and so it doesn't feel cramped at all. So look, clearly for somebody who's on the taller side, who wants something good looking but maybe a little bit more economical, then this should absolutely be on your list of bikes to demo. But for the rest of us who are pretty average in height, you can just enjoy the space.
Now, the other thing that I was perhaps expecting at this lower price point, in fact the most affordable Triumphs in their lineup by some stretch now, was a bit of a compromise on the hardware and componentry. But actually, I'd say it's really quite good. I mean, sure, this isn't Öhlins suspension or top-of-the-range Brembo brakes, but the chunky 43mm upside-down big piston fork and the preload adjustable monoshock at the rear do a great job of keeping things pretty composed while still offering plenty of travel and cushy comfort as you'd expect from a Scrambler. Then, the radial 4-piston caliper up front on a big 320mm single disc has plenty of bite and power, especially considering this bike comes in at just 179 kilograms wet, so it doesn't need masses of braking oomph to get it to stop.
Now, also a big shout out to today's video sponsor, and that's Metzeler Tyres, and they've actually provided the excellent Karoo Streets which are fitted to the Scrambler 400X as standard. Generally, I'd say you tend to find slightly more budget rubber on bikes at this sort of price point, but for me, Metzeler are amongst the best in the business, and the Karoo Street is a brilliant all-rounder. Not only do you have those sort of semi-knobbly, rugged looks that perfectly suit a bike like this, but also you've got great on and off-road performance with those big central blocks that give you plenty of grip on the road, then these decent lateral grooves that give you more grip off-road, and then also longitudinal grooves which push away water and also help them to self-clean with like dirt and mud. So yes, in my opinion, the perfect tyre for the job for this bike. But also, they've got a wide range of tyres to suit all sorts of conditions and riding styles, from the super sticky Sportex and Racetex to the excellent street all-rounders in the Roadtex, and of course the Tourons and Karoos, with a wide spectrum of capability for all sorts of adventure riding. So do check out the link down in the description below to see their full lineup. Certainly one to consider if you're thinking about fitting your bike with some fresh rubber for the new riding season. And once again, a massive thanks to Metzeler for their support. Now, look, we got to talk about this engine as well, which has to be one of the other standout features on this bike. It's a 398cc liquid-cooled single cylinder, which is pretty different, to be fair, to anything that we've seen on a Triumph, at least in recent memory. But look, it really suits a Scrambler style bike, and I think what it gives you is a lot of that big dirt bike feel that you associate with a big single cylinder. Then you've got decent performance as well. It's just shy of 40 horsepower, 37.5 newton meters of peak torque. And while that isn't actually, you know, top of the tree in terms of the spec sheet, when you've got it out on the road, it does feel like there's plenty of shove. When you twist the throttle, it's got a little bit of a, you know, punch forward in the lower gears, and you might not always expect that from a smaller capacity bike. Plus, it will get you up to 60 or 70, you know, those safe big road speeds with plenty of ease, and you can't always say that of some of the competition. I'm looking at you, Royal Enfield Scram 411. I really love what they've done with the throttle map on this bike. It's quite snappy. That's one of the things that does give it a bit of punch and liveliness and a bit of entertainment. I'm happy with the gearbox as well. It feels nice and precise, and the clutch as well is nice and light at the lever. Plus you've got a slipper, which means you don't have to be that accurate matching your revs when you're shifting down. And then the other big thing is the sound, which maybe is no surprise for Triumph because they always kind of nail it. But look, for a stock system, it sounds very, very good, providing of course you like the sound of a single cylinder, but they always seem to be able to extract a decent amount of bass while still complying with all those regulations they've got.
So look, it's good on price, it looks cool, it's really quite spacious, the build is good, the handling's great, the engine is generally impressive, so who wouldn't want one? Well, here are a few things that you might want to consider.
You know what I will say about this engine, and one of the downsides, although you could argue this is true of all single cylinder bikes, is that once you hit, you know, A road speeds and motorway speeds like this, getting on for 60 or 70, it really does start to buzz a bit. It's revving up around 6,000 RPM, and yeah, you can definitely feel it through the foot pegs. The bars, the seat, not too bad, but the pegs, I'm definitely feeling something that might get a little wearying if you're doing plenty of distance. So if you're looking for a bike that can commute and maybe do a bit of light touring, you may well be better off with a twin cylinder like the Honda CL500, for example. And look, I guess they could have fixed this maybe with the gearing. If they'd have given it longer gearing, it wouldn't be revving quite so hard at 60, 70. The thing is, it's really punchy and fun on B roads and around town, and they would have had to sacrifice some of that snap under acceleration, and so I can see why they've biased towards that to keep the fun factor.
I'd also probably say that this isn't the bike for anyone who's expecting a hardcore off-roader. I mean, yes, you've got a bit of extra travel in the suspension versus the Speed 400, and also you've got the oversized 19-inch front wheel for smoother rolling, but realistically, it is quite vulnerable underneath, and it's never going to perform like the new Himalayan, for example, which has been more so built for that kind of stuff. But look, the odd excursion onto light gravel will certainly be fine, and also having that tallness and the big front wheel, well, it can be beneficial even in town where you've got speed bumps and potholes and cobbles to contend with. And so for me, that ruggedness and versatility is certainly a good thing, but just don't expect a proper trail bike.
Now, the other thing that you might want to consider is the fact that the dash on this bike is really quite simple. So if you are a bit of a tech lover, then this might not be the bike for you. TFT displays are becoming more and more common on bikes, further and further down the price spectrum now, and so stuff like the Svartpilen 401 that we mentioned earlier from Husqvarna, you know, that's a bike with a similar intent, and that does come with a colour TFT display and phone connectivity and all that sort of stuff. This is much more simple. You've got the analog speedo around the outside, then an LCD over to the right. And while it does give you plenty of information, it tells you when the side stands down, for example, and all that kind of stuff. And also through here, you can switch off the traction control and the ABS. You know, otherwise that's about it. And there's nothing that you call particularly advanced. Now look, the way around this is quite simple. You could fit a phone mount like this quad lock that I'm using here. Plus, I've been using Kalamoto's excellent motorcycle-specific navigation app. But look, if you do want something fully integrated, then unfortunately, this isn't it.
Ultimately though, I reckon this bike will sell plenty of units solely based upon its rather fetching looks, and the analog dash fits much more neatly into the old school aesthetic than a big TFT slab would. In fact, you have to say hats off to Triumph for the styling generally on this bike, because it pretty much perfectly fits the bill of a baby sibling to the Scrambler 900 or 1200. They've done a great job on all the little details like the engine cases, the side panels, the headlight, the saddle, some of the little covers and brackets, and it all gives it a level of quality design that you'd expect from a Triumph no matter what the price. Overall, in terms of the wider stance, it does angle forward a little compared to some of the other modern classics, and I do think that removes a little bit of its retro authenticity, but generally, I think you have to say, it really is quite a nice thing to look at.
So look, do we feel like Triumph have, as I put it, nailed it with this bike? Well, you know, it's not as techy or perhaps quite so performance orientated as something like the Husqvarna, and it's not as smooth as the Honda. But the thing that makes a Triumph in my book is that level of finish, the real tasteful detail in the design, that slightly more old school feel to the looks as well. And then on top of that, really good all-round performance, good handling, good performance from the engine. And it feels like they've really played to their strengths with this bike. You know, it really is a great performer, but where I think it can trump any other bike is that I don't think there's anything in this sort of price range that has this level of desirability.
I'd fully expect this to be a roaring success in showrooms, and I'd wholeheartedly recommend getting yourself down there to demo one. But as always, let me know what you think of it down in the comments below, and if you fancy something a little bit more beefy, then I've made a comparison of the new Scrambler 1200s with the X and the XE, which I'll put on the screen now so you can give it a click and give it a watch in case you haven't already. Also, hit subscribe if you want to see more of the latest motorcycle reviews like this right here on YouTube. Many thanks for watching today, and we'll catch you in the next video.